Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ealing Road podcast, where on tonight's show we're going to be dissecting that painful Man United away last weekend. Looking forward to Burnley next week and also having a discussion around our recent run in form. Just before we get going, folks, remember if you haven't listened to the podcast before, please do subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels, leave a rating on both of them, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Joining me tonight after a while away is Tias. Tias, how are you, mate? Got a new tattoo?
Yeah, great to be back. It's actually of Denmark, so very on brand with, it's not Brentford related, I'm actually Danish. Some pretenders.
Fair enough, mate, fair enough. And also joining me tonight making his Ealing Road debut is Daniel. Daniel, lovely to have you on, mate. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. Daniel, we have a bit of a tradition on this podcast where I'm sure you know about already because you're a listener, but funniest Brentford story for every new guest. So yeah, I'll let you take it away. It's a nice little icebreaker.
Yeah, I've heard about this. We'll see how it stacks up to the others. You've had quite a few now. So mine dates back to Leicester away, which is the first game last season, in our second season in the Premier League. So I got there a bit early, as I normally do. I went to one of the designated away pubs, which was full of Brentford fans. Walk in, just minding my own business. There's a little pool table in the corner, and this guy walks in, or he might have already been there, and he seemed to have like this bag of pound coins. I don't think he was a Brentford fan. If he is, he could get in touch. But he had his bag of pound coins, and he was picking different Brentford fans to like challenge at a game of pool. But this guy looked like he had a few too many. You know, he was struggling to stand up. But anyway, he chose his first victim and put the pound coin in, started playing. But initially, he could not hit anything. He was not hitting anything. And obviously the other guy started going ahead. This guy, you know, drinking alcohol over his top. He all of a sudden, like, he let the other guy get ahead, and then all of a sudden he would just channel something and turn it on, and he would literally clean up. And he just suddenly have this ability to pot anything. So he must have been a pool player in his previous life. But anyway, once he had dealt with him, I was just in the corner hoping, you know, don't pick me. Anyway, he gets through a few more people, and then eventually, like the fourth or fifth guy, he looks at me and he's like, I'm going to face you. And I'm like, oh God, I don't really even play pool, you know, just casually, occasionally with some mates. But yeah, so I go to, he lets me break because he lets all his partners break. And I literally break and the black goes straight in. And at the time, I thought that you lose. I thought I've lost. But I've heard since then that apparently you win if you pop the black in your break shot. That's what I've read online. I might be wrong. But anyway, he let me have a second go and I did win. So that was the closest I've ever felt to scoring a goal for Brentford, because the pub did. And yeah, it was just a bit crazy because this guy, yeah, he must do it every week to any team that's visiting Leicester.
100%. Sounds like a bit of a hustler, bit of Ronnie O'Sullivan. I know my dad used to do that trick when he was a kid. He used to go in and sort of pretend he was half cup and then just let the other person go ahead and then just put everything on the table. I need to check you up on that fact about if you pot the black off a break, you win the game. I'm not gonna say anything because I've heard you're a lawyer, so I'll let you take that one.
I thought I was wrong at the time, so it was not until afterwards. I don't know why I was Googling it, but I'm sure that's what I read. But someone maybe knows better than me.
Fair enough. We'll get on to Man United. That's a pretty good one, to be fair. We need to start ranking them. I said this in the last one, but we really need to start ranking them. Anyway, Tias, we got to talk about Man United. Terrible scenes. You were stood next to me. Is that the worst way to lose a football match?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I don't. I think the worst. I mean, QPR away always springs to mind when things like that happen. Just being on top of the world to having it all crumble down in a matter of seconds. I don't know. I'm just so far beyond the point of caring about this season where it kind of just kind of just hit. I just stood there for a second. One of my mates who came with me, James, had actually left after the 1-1 goal went in. I kind of wish I did the same, but I was, had my tinfoil hat on, thinking, yeah, point away at Man United. This is brilliant. But having to see their celebrations was
rough.
It's just one of those ones you just want to turn your back. And I mean, I've seen Brentford fans going, "Oh, look how far Man United have fallen that they're celebrating like that against Brentford." But honestly, like, get a grip. If you win any game of football like that, I don't care if we were playing, say, Burton at home when we're in the Championship, I would fucking lose my nut if we won a game like that. Let them celebrate it. Just, we're bad. They have a memory for life in that game, and I don't care.
100%. I was kind of speaking to some colleagues about the game, and I kind of saying, I've seen some rough days as a Brentford fan. Like Doncaster springs to mind as obviously the worst one, but that one was right up there. And I don't know why, because if you look at the result on paper, it doesn't look like a bad result. But I think it was just the fact that with all of it, we were 1-0 up basically the whole game. Hadn't won at Manchester United since like the 30s or something like that. It was soul destroying. I went out in Manchester and had a shit night afterwards, just because it was just terrible. It was right up there with some of the worst endings to a Brentford game I think I've ever seen, and that's saying something with the history that we have. Daniel, before we get into dissecting the match action itself, sum up how you felt at half time. I've just given you a little synopsis of how I felt.
At half time, I was delighted.
Full time.
I was at that QPR game you're referring to as well, and it's very similar. Like, maybe that was worse because of who they are, but yeah, I was gutted. I couldn't watch Match of the Day. I normally like watching it just to see the other games as well, and obviously I knew we'd be on first. It took me about 3 days to watch it, and I still wanted to skip over the first bit. But yeah, I was gutted. Yeah. Normally in those circumstances, I wouldn't go to Old Trafford, thinking we're going to win. But it's just in those circumstances, if we had held out for a draw even, I would have been disappointed. But maybe after a few hours, I would have, thought, actually, that's quite good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just absolutely gutting. And obviously we can't do anything about it for 2 weeks because we're now into an international break.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should do this chronologically because it was kind of a game of two halves. TS, were you pleased with that first half? Because I think, by all accounts, I think that was the best the first half could have gone. We scored early, got under their skin, got their fans offside. What do you think?
It was one of those ones where I kind of look back at it now and think they were just really bad, and we only looked good because they were really bad. I think all our chances, like we had like quite a few, well, not chances as such, but we were kind of running at their defence, and it would get to Wissa or get to Brian, and they'd be like, oh, right, what do we do now? Or it would get out to Rusev and he'd just hit it straight at a player. It felt as if we were really, we're defensively, I'd say up until the 90th minute, we're fantastic, but one of the best defensive performances I've seen from us in a while. But it's just that lack of concentration yet again. We're the opposite of the team we came up as, where we were coming back to win games. We're now we can't hold out games at all. But yeah, so now I don't know how to look on how we're playing. I do now think it's just a case of they were really, really bad.
Fair enough. Lots of noise on Twitter about how we were kind of asking to concede with how far back we sat in that second half. I just mentioned it's kind of a tale of two halves. Slightly conflicted by that. I don't know what you're going to say about this, TS, given your first answer, but just because I'm kind of the opinion, on one hand, we're playing Man United away. These aren't the games we should be winning if we're looking to do anything in the league, bar staying up. But at the same time, you look at sort of their record and everything that's going on, you kind of do get your hopes up. And then on the other side of the coin, you look at their players, player for player, there's a big gap in quality.
I don't think you can look at the table that way anymore, because it's a bit of a strange league where, I mean, you look at Aston Villa, Newcastle, Brighton, that's 3 extra teams where you can now add to the list of, they're really good teams and probably will be fighting for Champions League, so let's just write off any points against those. And if you add in, say, the old big clubs like a Chelsea or a Man United, who may finish like 11th, and then we'll be looking at it like, oh, we dropped points against an 11th place team. But if you're adding them to like this massive list, it's going to be like 11 teams, and then we've only got 9 teams in the league where we can physically go, oh, we should have got points against them. I don't think you can look at that like it that way.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. It's one that kind of touches on a lot of the stuff we were talking about on the podcast before about how kind of expectations change, and with the way that the league is changing at the moment, you make a good point. What did you make of the second half, Daniel? Do you think we invited those 2 goals?
I think we do it a lot in terms of we often go between a low block and a high press at other times. And, normally and up until the last minute, I can't remember Man United having any real, clear-cut chances. Strakosha wasn't, exceptionally busy. And normally we do it well. And, even over the years when we've had these great results against, at the Etihad and various other big games, like that, there would always have been periods where we did sit back and we got through it and we did it well. I think what really made the difference is probably the subs, because obviously McTominay was a substitute, but in terms of our subs as well, I thought we just we were lacking energy at the end. We couldn't get out, and obviously at the moment our bench is very weak, and our options on the bench, I don't think there was much Thomas Frank could do. Whereas, I think that's really what made the difference for United in coming through.
Yeah, I think someone on the GPG was asking about why, if we're going to go back to the wall for that whole second half, he didn't bring on Zanka, and he brought on bloody Frank Onyeka, who's really starting to piss me off recently. Because did he get booked? I'm pretty sure he did get booked, and I think that's about. Yeah. By the way, I don't want to talk about referees again. This isn't even in the running order, but I don't want to talk about referees again. But I was watching that game. All of our players got booked, and there was about 3 or 4 challenges from Man United in the first half.
The Højlund one in the first half was catastrophic. I don't know how he didn't get a yellow card for that.
I don't know how any of them got away with it, but got away with it not getting in the book. It was just mental. Anyway, we've spoken about referees enough. We did that last week. With the goals, someone else did ask this on the GPG. Do we feel Strakosha could have done any better, Daniel?
Oh, I feel like with our goalkeepers, whoever's in goal at the moment, I'm just more paranoid about it. And I feel like we're looking into everything our goalkeepers do right now because of the situation. And I think that dates back to when we have Fernandes in goal, when Raya was injured 2 years ago. It's because obviously every keeper we've had that isn't Raya, since before Raya came, we've had question marks over. And to be honest, I think Strakosha did okay. I thought he could have held on to a few more things, but he made the saves that he should make. I think it's a very difficult one. I don't know if we would be having the same conversation if it was Raya in goal. And obviously, I don't know how early in the day Flecken pulled out. I heard he came ill in the morning. And obviously, it's a tough place to go. I know Strakosha's got the experience. He's an international and he's played at a good level. But still coming in the last minute with a defence that he hasn't actually played in front very much. It was his Premier League debut. I thought he did okay. But I can see Flecken still coming back in when he's back, because Thomas Frank seems to have taken that decision that he's his number one. Yeah.
I think, Tias, what do you reckon? Someone on the GPG, Big Russ on the GPG, asking how much grief Flecken would have got conceding those goals, and I'm thinking he gets a lot, to be honest. I know it's kind of dubious. The way you've just said it, Daniel, is like he did okay with some of the saves that he made in the game. They were a little bit on the edge of okay when he was parrying it sort of back into our penalty area. But with McTominay's second especially, he gets a big hand to it and kind of just flaps in off the post. What do you reckon, Tia?
I thought the crowd was a bit pathetic treating Strakosha, to be honest. Like, I think everyone was just so happy Flecken wasn't playing that we were almost treating Strakosha. It felt like he'd won a competition to be in goal, and he was putting so many balls off the pitch, and then occasionally he'd ping one pass and everyone would start clapping, and you'd hear some bloke behind me go, "See, that's Flecken would not do." Flecken does that all the time. Both goal. The first goal especially, he hasn't held on to it. I haven't watched the second goal back, I'm not going to lie, because I don't want to. But from what I remember, he just saves it onto the post. And again, if Flecken does that, he's getting an absolute howler. What I will caveat it with is I think a keeper, especially match sharpness, is so important. And this guy has played against Colchester and West Ham. That's the only two games I can think of. Maybe Gillingham, did he? No, because Raya came in for Gillingham. I don't know. That's like 2 games he's played for us professionally. And now it makes the decision to put Flecken in for that Arsenal game even more stupid, because if Stockosher had maybe had one, professional game he's played a couple of weeks ago, he comes into this game a bit more fresh, a bit more comfortable with the back line, and you could tell that he hadn't played, and there's a lot of pressure on him as well when you wait this long to play a Premier League game, and suddenly he's got to perform, and I think that made his shot stopping probably a bit more shaky, and that's probably why he wasn't holding on to it a bit more, because he's more focused on keeping the ball out rather than than he doesn't spill it or anything.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see who starts against Burnley, because I've heard that Flecken's got appendicitis, but he hasn't needed to have surgery or anything. He's just on antibiotics to get rid of it. But it is a weird one with Brentford goalkeepers at the moment. It feels like whoever goes in goal, they're going to be in the firing line regardless of whether we win or not, because it's going to either be their distribution or it's either going to be them making people nervous in the stands. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who starts against Burnley. T.S., go on.
I would like to say I think we've just missed an absolute shocker in the summer, and I did mention it to somebody. My family club is Brondby, and I went to go watch them in May, and their keeper at the time was Mads Armanisson, 23-year-old Danish goalkeeper, who's now gone to Leicester, and and I said at the time that we should sign him. I don't care that he's a Danish league keeper. He looks good. He looks exactly the kind of player we want. He's good with his feet, great shot stopper, young and Danish. That ticks all the boxes. He's gone to Leicester, and by the sounds of it, he's doing fantastically there. So I just don't understand how that's the perfect goalkeeper we could have had, and we've completely just missed out on him.
Yeah, the recruitment team needs to start listening to you more, TS. I'm still gutted that we missed out on Chris Wood.
Chris Wood, I'm telling you. He's doing a job for us right now.
Daniel, thoughts on Mbumo's performance? I've thought in the last few games he's looked miles off it, and I also have a massive problem with him giving away that handball at the end of the game, which led to McTominay's winner when the ball was going out into touch and he just sticks his arm out to handball it and give the foul away. But just thoughts on his performance in general. I hope I'm remembering that right, because it wasn't on Match of the Day, but I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I think it's always silly giving away any kind of clumsy late free kick when they've just brought McTominay on, who's not bad of his head, and they've got Maguire, who's gonna if he's good at anything, he's probably quite good at getting in the box and getting his head onto the end of things. In general, I think more recently, compared to at the beginning of the season, he's been playing a bit more further back at times, coming more into the midfield, whereas if he wants to be the main man now in Tony's absence, I feel like he needs to sometimes be playing a bit further forward. I think at times when we've been chasing games, he's almost been a wing back in the back five formation, whereas earlier on in the season, obviously I remember that goal against Bournemouth, he was clean through. I felt that he was playing a bit more further forward, and I feel like goals probably give him confidence, and he started the season very well, and I think if he can find that form again, it might be affecting him at the moment that the goals aren't flowing. But I also just seem to think that his position seems to have slightly changed to me, but I don't know if that's just something that I've noticed or not.
Yeah, I think it's you mentioned confidence. In a way, we've kind of got two confidence strikers up top in Wissa and Mbumo. I think that's one of the things we miss massively about Tony, is that he's not a confidence player who'll score every week or most weeks, whereas Wissa and Mbumo really rely on a good run of form to find the back of the net in consecutive weeks. A lot of people getting onto Mbemre's back, and it is just a shame, because considering how well he started the season, I remember me and Clayton were kind of talking about it at the start. We were all hyping him up as this is your chance to sort of be the main man at Brentford, and since his goals at the start of the season, it's kind of fizzled out, and you can hear the groans. It just happens with Brentford players that have kind of, some are in favour and some aren't. you can hear the groans whenever they give away the ball. Like Wissa is one of those players, and Boomer is one of those players. Tony is not one of those players. If he gives away the ball, you never hear a groan because you know that he's got the goods when it comes to goal scoring. Anyway, we'll stop the United talk because it's just killing me a little bit, to be honest. I don't think I'm over it yet. We'll get on to some more general questions about our recent form. TS, are we in a relegation scrap?
Any other season we would be, but I think the bottom three are just going to be so bad this season that we might just get away with it. If it was last season and you look at the quality of sides that were down there, your Leicesters, Leeds and Southamptons, we'd be bottom of that pile right now. I don't think there's anything embarrassing about it though. You look at the team, it is probably, like, with all the fit players we have, it's one of the worst teams, maybe the worst team we've had since we've been up. But again, just it's kind of out of our hands in a way, because we do have a really good team when everyone's fit, and that was when we went through that, what was it, 10 games of that win run during the winter of 2021-2022. Like, it was just, once we have all our players back, we'll be fine, and we were fine. I think that's the same again this season. We just got to ride this out, unfortunately, lads.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the worst Premier League team we've had, considering we mentioned Fernandes. That's period in the first season when Raya was out, Tony was out. We had Charlie Good playing at centre half for a little bit.
Guy was great. If you don't remember that Everton at home performance, 1-0, he was fantastic that day, and he might not have even played. I'm just making that up. In my head, he played that game.
Daniel, what were you thinking? Are we in a relegation fight?
I think it's important to remember how early it still is, and it annoys me a bit saying this, but we are generally playing well. That's not gonna, get us the points we need. Just saying that. I think the difference this year is the small errors at both ends. Like, we're missing some sitters that we should score. I think I saw that we're like 19th this year in like shots on target or percentage of shots on target, whereas last year we were right at the top. And in defence, there's so many goals we can attribute to probably just like an individual error. And if you cut those out, then we'd probably have a lot more points to our name. But maybe it's new signings bedding in, maybe it's as a result of what we've lost. And yeah, I think the United game was also down to not having the bench there to bring on the fresh legs when we need it, which unfortunately a lot of our injuries are going to be out for quite a while, so we're going to have to find a way around that.
Yeah, I think I can say with confidence, I'm going to say I don't think we are going to go down. I think that's an impossibility, considering the injuries we have, considering that we potentially could have Tony back in January, which we'll talk about more because there's a question about it later. But in terms of the teams that have come up, I think there are definitely 3 worse teams in the leagues than us. And when we do start to get some of our most important players back, the performances, which are already good, will start to turn into winning performances. So again, Brentford fans on Twitter, with the head loss after we lose, please stop. Like, it's going to be okay.
Can I have an unpopular opinion for a second?
Go for it.
I would rather, just from a match going
don't say go down. Don't say go down.
No, I would rather be 17th than 13th going into April. I would be bang up for a relegation battle with the risk of us going down than just being 13th. Because I generally, if we're like April and we're just 13th safe, but we can't do anything, what's going to get me out of it? I will probably stay in the Griffin for the game. If we're going into that end games, the Luton away, the Everton away, the Bournemouth away, with the Fulham at home, that and we stay up, that would be mega. I don't care. I'm all for a bit. I'm all for a bit of fun. Like, I'm not going to look back at life and go, "Oh, that season we finished 13th was great." I'll go, "That season we went down, but we won one game at the end and had a fucking great day." That's the kind of games you take to your grave. And what's the worst happen? We go down to the Championship and do what Leicester are doing at the moment, just win every game. Fun. Just everyone calm down. Whatever happens, we're fine.
I'm with you on maybe potentially rather being in a relegation scrap than sort of having another dead rubber. I don't want to call it dead rubber because
everyone just takes this football thing too seriously.
But I mean, yeah, a relegation scrap would definitely be more exciting than sort of being safe by April, but also knowing that we won't have a European charge like we did last season. It would make those sort of that run of games towards the end that little bit more exciting. But I mean, it's a tricky topic to tackle, because I don't want to go down to the Championship. We talked about it on the last podcast. Some of the games in the Championship, I mean, in the Premier League, every game I want to go to now, I don't want to miss one. Whereas sometimes in the Championship on a Tuesday night, when you're going up to Middlesbrough, knowing that you're probably going to lose 3-0, even though we didn't last year, or even though we didn't last time we were in the Championship. We won 4-1, was it, when we were in the Championship? Something like that. But
it's great. Think about those good times, guys.
Yeah, I mean, good times. But I mean, in terms of going down, we'd probably come straight back up with the parachute payments, but the financial we'd take from broadcasting rights and everything like that.
Let's have an Everton-style pitch invasion instead at the end of the season when we stay up.
That would be good.
Climb down from the top of the West End. That would be impossible.
I know, especially with the stewards. Anyway, we'll get on to questions before we do hot topic. We got RF Pato asking on the GPG, how do we sort out a mentality when leading? Yes, injuries are limiting who we can bring on, but do the lads have a strong enough mindset to see games out? We kind of had this problem at the start of last season where we dropped points against Wolves, I want to say, and then against Forest as well. I don't know, and I don't like sort of questioning mentality of players when you're not in a kind of title race. I know, like, the Sky Sports pundit do it about Arsenal a lot whenever they're in it. When they were in a title race last year, they were kind of questioning the mentality of the players. But based on sort of the post-match interviews, especially with Christian Norgard coming out and saying the performances are there, and he is right, like, the performances have been there. And the only game that we've played particularly bad in was Everton, and we got beat for that. But the performances have been there. I wouldn't say it's a mindset issue. Daniel, what do you think?
No, I think until some point last season, we had this record of whenever we scored first in the Premier League, we hadn't lost and that lasted for quite a while. I think obviously it's a similar group still, so I don't necessarily think that's a problem. I think Thomas Frank especially is very good at whether we win, lose or draw, not getting too high or too low, and he always says 24 hours and then they go again. And I think the performance thing, I think that's also drilled into them. I think they know that on average, more often than not, obviously there's a lot of variables in football, but more often than not, if you keep playing well, you will get rewards eventually. How many sitters are we going to miss, and how many individual mistakes are we going to have? I think we have no choice but to move on from that, and just keep doing the things that are working, and just we know what's not working, and just try and cut those out. I don't think it's a mindset issue.
Yeah, I think out of the games we've played so far, we've led in 5 and only won once. Tias, that 3-0 away result against Fulham seems like a fucking long time ago. Does it not? Is that just me? I don't know. It feels so long ago.
I mean, yeah, I was living in a different part of the country then. That was another lifetime.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get on to the next question. Will, Ealing Road, ex-Ealing Road regular, asked how can we find a way to blame Fleckham when he isn't playing, which I thought we'd include just because it's funny. South Stand B's asking about Ivan Toney. He says, would you keep hold of Toney until the end of his contract and let him go for free instead of taking 60 million in January? Benefit for him being he would be able to negotiate a better contract as no transfer fee is needed. Benefit for us would be keeping for another one and a half seasons. To be honest, me and Jay and I talked about this on the podcast when he came on a couple of weeks ago. Whether we sell or keep Ivan Toney very much depends on how we're doing by the time January rolls around. If we need his goals, I don't see the hierarchy at Brentford saying that we could sell him. I mean, if we are in 13th and it looks like we're going to stay up, I'd say cash in on him when his contract has the most amount of time to run out. What do we think, Tias?
If the money's right, you sell him. I'm sorry.
Regardless of the situation?
Yeah, like Thomas Frank says, if there's 4 teams in the world that are not selling clubs, and I'm sorry, you can't turn down that. If someone comes in with 85 million, you just can't say no, I'm afraid.
Even if we're in the bottom 3 in January.
Yeah, because just why risk it? And then suddenly, you can see Toney coming out and going, "Oh, I can't be arsed with the relegation scrap or whatever." Everyone falls out, and then we lose him for 50, and we're in the Championship. It's just not worth it.
Yeah,
take the money. You just take the money.
You do kind of make a good point in it. And Ivan Toney's recently switched his agents to another agent company or whatever it is. And I was speaking about this to my girlfriend the other day, and I was like, players have in the past just kind of refused to play because the club won't sell them. And based on everything I've seen of Ivan Toney, great goal scorer, good mentality, but he doesn't. I just feel like that.
You could imagine that happening. He's probably one of the top 5 players in the world where I could see that happening.
Yeah. What do you think, Daniel?
If that happens, I think we're in a different situation. I think our hands are forced. I think these days players have quite a lot of power, but I'd like to think that he owes us something. I'd like to think that he also thinks that too. I would definitely not keep him for 1.5 years until his contract runs down. I would definitely sell next summer if that means he's got us out of trouble by then. But yeah, I think it also depends on if we've got anyone lined up to come in. I don't know what Phil Giles is looking at.
Chris Wood.
Targets in mind, yeah. Chris Wood's not getting much game time at Forest, is he? So.
Short-term line. Do it again, run it back.
Yeah, I think it depends on various factors, but I'm sure we're already planning ahead, just like we probably were with Raya.
I mean, I've seen some rumours, I don't know if they're true or not, that we were looking at a German Bundesliga striker. I don't know if you guys saw that today. Yeah,
Stuttgart.
Not Hoffman. Yeah, he's like top scorer in the Bundesliga. I can't remember his name now, but I mean, if there are rumours kind of circulating, I don't know if there are rumours kind of circulating. They kind of do point towards maybe we're thinking about selling him in January. Anyway, we'll get on to hot topic. This week's hot topic is fairly obvious. Arsenal hosted Man City in a blockbuster clash that was very underwhelming, but Arsenal picked up the 3 points courtesy of Gabriel Martinelli's deflected goal. Tias, I know it's early on, mate. Who's winning the league this year? This is going to make for a nice clip for Instagram, whatever you say.
I would say that Tottenham Hotspur are going to win the league.
Tottenham Hotspur?
Yeah.
Okay, expand. So. I can't make a clip out of that. I can't make a clip out of that, TS.
I think Man City are just... I mean, everyone just thinks they're always going to pull through, but you look at their team. I was looking at that game and thinking they are genuinely a worse team, and obviously they are. They sold, 5 of their best players in the summer, and they've replaced them with fairly young players like Doku, and just expecting that, I don't know, their defence will be fine without Laporte. I think Vardiol's a very different player. You look at them, it's a Rodri thing, you can say, but I don't. Pep clearly has absolutely zero time for Calvin Phillips, and when you literally have to pinpoint your success on one player like that, I don't think it works. And you look at Tottenham or an Arsenal or even a Liverpool, I think they don't really anymore. They're weaker in that sense, where they probably don't have as many world-class players, but they're stronger in the fact that as a team, I think if you get rid of... There's not one player in those teams where if you get rid of them, they completely fall apart. As much as Rodri does. Obviously, if Heung-min Son goes, then they're a worse team, obviously, but...
What, do you think Spurs have the squad depth, though? Because I feel like if... Madison gets injured,
they're not playing in Europe.
Yeah, so I mean, it's true, but
they're out of the Carabao Cup already. It's literally they're just Premier League. They're not going to go far in the FA Cup. It's Spurs. So
Daniel, big Ange for the title. Ange Ball for the title.
I'm afraid not. You know what? I love it. I would rather anyone win it than City at this point, just because it's something different. I was glad Arsenal won the game yesterday, or the other day, but I still can't really look past City. I think this time last year we were saying, they've got worse with Haaland, and they were probably in a similar position to where they are now. And I just think, normally before Christmas they just coast along, and then after Christmas, they win about 20 in a row, and people can't catch them. I don't think it's just a case of the squad. I think they've probably got the best manager in the world, and they're competing against a lot of teams. Their nearest challengers, Arsenal and Tottenham, haven't won a league between them in the last 20 odd years. So it's very difficult. It might get closer, but you need City to drop off, I think, if someone else is going to win it. I don't think another team will get 90 plus points.
Yeah, I think to be fair, I think out of the title contenders from early on in the season, you'd say Man City, Arsenal, and Tottenham. But out of those three, when I've watched each of the three, I still think Tottenham have actually like excited me the most. I think they play the best football. Even in the North London derby, if anyone was going to win that game in like based on pure merit in terms of football played, I actually thought Tottenham looked really good as opposed to Arsenal. I know they hammered Bournemouth the other week, but I don't think Arsenal have actually got out of second gear yet. But with the signings that Arsenal have made and with the amount of money they've spent, I would actually say Arsenal are probably in pole position in terms of this early season. I mean, with Declan Rice in the team, I think it turns them into a completely different machine. But yeah,
I wouldn't write off Liverpool either because they've looked okay and they are one of those teams who could just blow away anyone at any given moment and you wouldn't even bat an eyelid, would you? So
yeah. They've finally sorted their midfield out as well, and they've got a nice bit of depth in midfield. That Szoboszlai looks a real player.
Yeah, fantastic.
Final remarks. I've been screaming out. I don't know why Calvin Phillips is still at Man City. The fact that Rico Lewis started instead of him in the game against Arsenal with Rodri out. Why isn't Calvin Phillips at Brighton? I just think that with the way he plays, I think he would fit Brighton's playing style perfectly. He's not a like-for-like replacement for Caicedo, but just in terms of how he can pass the ball and pick up the ball from the goalkeeper, I think it's a signing made in heaven. Anyway, we'll go on to Burnley because we need to talk about how important this game is. Daniel, how important is the game next week?
It is massive, even if it is just to keep them 3 points behind us, or 6 points behind us if we beat them. If they beat us, they're right there where we are, and I felt that we missed chances against like Palace and Bournemouth at home, and we really need to take advantage of these kind of games because when we go to Burnley, they'll be looking at us in the same way. And I've looked ahead a bit, and 3 of the next 4 after Burnley are Chelsea, Arsenal, and Liverpool. I think we've got West Ham at home in there as well, but that's not an easy run. And if we can go into that with the pressure off a bit, we might even do better in those games. But I think it's tough if we're going into those 4 games with another draw or another defeat. So yeah, it's massive, but it's still early. It's not do or die. So if we lose, there's time, but it's big.
Yes, they were beaten comfortably by Chelsea last time out. But honestly, I've watched them a couple of times this season, and to be fair, they stick to their guns in terms of how Company wants them to play. And the only reason they're getting kind of rolled aside by some of the big 6 teams is because of how sort of expansive and play out the back football they play. Will they be coming to the GTEC next weekend fancying their chances against a team who hasn't won since the second week of the season? Because to me, on paper, it looks like it screams of one of those games. I remember Norwich at home the first year we came up, when it was like, right, this is the point where we get our season back on track, and then they got their first win of the season, and we were really thinking, shit's going to hit the fan. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, you look at it, and if there is going to be a kind of team they'll play well against, it will be us.
Yeah, be us.
If they just go all at it, and then suddenly we have to play on the counter at home to Burnley, it's not going to be a recipe for success, I don't think. And they kind of feel to me a bit like, a Forest where they've signed so many players, a lot of them being unknowns, and it feels like they probably don't know their best team yet. And like Forest, what they did like stay up, last season in the end because they had enough in the squad to get them through, and they could be a team. So in that sense, I think we're probably still playing them at a good time where they haven't really worked out what their best 11 is, how all the teams should play together. So it is massive considering the fixtures we've got coming up after it, and then even December is a bit nicer, but it's December, so you just can't rely on that being any string of games being a good string of games. So this is probably our best chance at 3 points we've got left of the year. No, to put it bluntly, we kind of touched on it earlier in the podcast. We also have in previous ones, but if we are in a relegation scrap that people think we are, surely, Dan, it's fixtures like this at home against one of the promoted sides that we have to be winning, especially with kind of the way that the start of the season's gone. If it comes to that time around April, and I know you said you wanted relegation scrap, TS, but if it comes to that time around April, we're going to be looking back on games like Forest when they're down to 10 and we lose.
Probably games like Man United as well, just because the fashion it was. But at home to Burnley, and with the way that they've been swept aside this season, these are the points we need to pick up if we want to stay up.
Yeah, I don't think we can always rely on like the nice surprises we've had in the last few years where we've gone to the Etihad and won. I don't think those things are more unlikely to happen. In these sort of games, it's more where we've got to turn up, unlike the Everton game, which is probably the worst game this season to not turn up to. But yeah, the thought of Burnley dominating possession, which I think they will, makes me feel quite uneasy. But I think it's more about we've got to take our chances when they come, and we've just got to cut out the mistakes at the back. And if we do that, we've got a chance. I think one of Burnley's problems is probably finishing chances too. I think they played quite well in places, and it probably does serve them well in games like this that they don't change their style because it's just drilled into them so much. Whereas obviously we will change based on who we're playing. But yeah, we'll be aware of that. I think there's a few things we got to think about in terms of we don't have a left back at the moment because Hickey is going to be banned for that game. So there's a few things we've got to sort out and think about how we're approaching that. But I'm sure Thomas Frank will have an idea.
I read that Pinnock could be out soon. Apparently, he's been taken out of Jamaica's team on the international break. Yep. Pinnock's arguably been our best player this season, I think, so far. Is Ben Mee in the run-in to start? Maybe I've heard.
Allegedly, but I don't think he's going to be thrown straight back in the start, is it? So it's going to be very. I wouldn't be surprised if simply because of personnel we have to play a back three.
Yeah,
because we don't have the full backs. We have Aya, Zanka, and Collins, but I think none of that. If you play Aya right back, you're going to play Ruestab left back, because then the only option there is say like playing Godos at left, but he can only play left wing back. It's very different.
I think Inel's played there before years ago.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
I mean,
Frank has been known to play Mad Spec there, so anyone really could play there in the back four, and Frank would think that's okay.
I mean, to be fair, and this might sound harsh, but I'm so glad he's not at Brentford anymore. He used to make me so nervous. Anyway, I think that'll be a good point to wrap things there, boys. Ealing Road Podcast will be back next week for a special episode, so please keep your eyes peeled on our socials for that. Following that, we'll be back after the Burnley game to hopefully, fingers crossed, review a much needed 3 points. Remember, guys, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, please do share it around with your mates. Subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels, leave a rating, and also follow us on our socials. That's at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Cheers, guys, and we'll see you next week.